self-books online. I've not been able to have any sort of career-oriented employment. I was denied admissions to college because of the criminal conviction. I've been chased and kicked out of my home a number of times over the years because of the Megan's Law registration. I spent a year in intensive post-traumatic stress disorder treatment therapy, and I have a quiet, as simple as possible, isolated life. And up until June, I was relatively anonymous in our neighborhood in Connecticut where we live. I don't quite feel that way now that the DA's report was very big news, and it sort of took away the anonymity that we had tried to build up over the last few years. But it's mostly very simple and very isolated because of the conviction.
Jesse, I wanted to ask you, Andrew referred to the film as being somewhat ambiguous about whose story do you believe? And I wonder how you feel about that. How when people come away from this film, they can have all kinds of different interpretations. Over the years, Andrew himself has become much more determined about the conclusion he draws from this case.
I never thought that the movie was in any way ambiguous. I have always felt that the movie you just saw is incredibly clear about the fact that it was a terrible police investigation and that I was innocent. But what it isn't is an advocacy piece, and I've always tried to point out that nobody in this film is misquoted. Nobody has anything that Dave said out of context. All sides had an opportunity to share their point of view. It wasn't the kind of film where it just talked to a bunch of people who got wronged by the police, and then there's a caption at the end that says, "We reached out to law enforcement and they declined to speak to us." Like, everyone has the opportunity to speak what they want to say in this film. And it's fair and it's balanced, but I don't think it's ambiguous.
Take another question, right here in the middle.
I think it is ambiguous because I came away from this film 10 years ago and dined out on it with friends for another year, and it would come up in every conversation, and I was always stunned that people didn't come away thinking what you just said. But there was this real dichotomy of people thinking all the way to the left or the right about whether there was guilt, who had it, whatever. So I have to say, I think that is not what my experience of it was. But what I wanted to ask you was, what are your feelings about your father at this point? I mean, I'd also like to ask you what your feelings are about your mother, too, by the way. But if you could answer one or both.
The mother is a much easier question to answer. It definitely was difficult growing up with my mother. And we've had a lot of struggles over the years since I got out of prison. But she's not the same person that she was 25 years ago. She's not the same person she was even 10 years ago. We get along really well. I was up to see her last weekend. I had to put up quite a number of sort of emotional boundaries at a certain point. We had to kind of learn how to be close with me as an adult instead of a child, and prison very much kind of infantizes you, so it was a big adjustment period. But we get along real well. I mean, I'd like to see her more often than I do. It's difficult. I know she's very lonely these days, and I do what I can. And she's actually been really nice to me lately, so I'm kind of thankful for that. Can't say any of the same things about my dad. But I haven't seen or spoken to my father in 26 years. And his death was 20 years ago now. I know it's very sort of present tense in the film, but for me it was a really long time ago, and I have not had any opportunities to work through any issues with him, because he went off to one prison and I went off to the other, and so I kind of think none of it's ever going to necessarily get very much resolved for me at this point. I mean, I don't miss him. I don't have terrible fondness for him at this point in my life. I think that's kind of about it. Yeah.
Why did they not make part of his plea deal that you had a certain lesser sentence or something?
You know, I had maybe I
Did everyone hear the question?
Yeah, the question is, why didn't he make a better deal for Jesse as a condition of his guilty plea? And I asked the prosecutor this question, Joe Honorado, and he said to me, why did I have to make him a deal? I said, I had, this guy was going to jail. I had, the whole community was in favor. It was not going to be hard. Why would I have made a better deal for Arnold? And I just thought he was so confident that he was going to get a conviction. And it's clear from all the letters and stuff that Arnold wrote that he really did think, and I think maybe deluded himself, to believe that he had made some provision. Like he said, the whole reason I took this plea is because it was going to get me out of the way, so that I had my child pornography conviction, and what was I going to do? I was going to fight that. I had this pornography, but I needed to get out of the way for Jesse, because Jesse couldn't have gone to jail with an adult pedophile as a co-defendant. It would have been a disaster for him. You could make the argument that Jesse would have been, 14, 15 years old when these computer classes would have taken place. He was a completely different entity from his father. And yet, he was kind of, it all became one thing in the end. But I think Arnold thought that he did everything that he could. I think he wanted to do. I think Arnold would have done a lot to try to get them to go easier on Jesse. And I think he thought by stepping aside and taking this federal plea on the pornography charge that he would be making it easier for Jesse.
For people who want to keep up with this case and developments in it, what can they do? Is there a website to go to or something they can follow?
FreeJesse.net is active, and there's all sorts of case material and links to recent press articles. We have a lot of the court documents. There's case chronologies. There's even a very lengthy statement that I had prepared and presented to the case review advisory panel. So there's certainly, we've tried to put up an enormous amount of resources in terms of delving deeper into the case. If you really want active updates, there's a petition, change.org petition that's active still, and that mailing list, I think, gets more sort of regular.
If you just go online, you go to justiceforjesse.com. Justiceforjesse.com has a petition which is being prepared for the governor and try to get some more attention to the case.
I'm sorry, we have to wrap up this portion of it, but if you want to join us for more questions, I think Andrew will join us for a drink. We're going to go over to the bar and restaurant Wong, which is on Cornelia Street, right behind the theater. You just go up to West 4th Street, make a U-turn onto Cornelia Street, look for the red W. They have drink specials here. You can get directions from me outside, and also if you have one of these, you'll get a discount drink. Is there last consult here?
I don't know, did you want to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I work as part of the defense team. I just want, in case there is any ambiguity, and maybe it wasn't clear, but there's absolutely no evidence, physical or anecdotal, other than the statements of the police, that anything untoward happened in any of those 8 classes over the years in which hundreds of children attended, their parents came to pick them up, so that, whether, Jesse or even his father, who was guilty of owning pornographic magazines. There was no evidence, and nobody has ever been able to put up any credible evidence that anybody was touched or certainly molested and certainly sodomized or anything like that. So this was a gross wrongful conviction.
Thank you. You can do us a favor by clearing this theater as fast as possible so my hardworking theater manager can get the next film in. But come please join us over at Wong on Cornelia Street. Thank you very much, Jesse Friedman.